This is the 3 diaphragms model, a systems approach that has helped hundreds of people create a way forward from their complex health challenges. It's a simple story to give you a new understanding about the complex connections between your mind, body, and spirit. I share this story with every client as a tool that will also help you understand the systems relationships between your pain and movement challenges and your unique health history. We begin here at the sacrum, and on either side we have your 2 pelvic bones. Those rest on top of your thigh bones, which rest on top of your shins, your ankles, all the way down to the big toe. From there, above the pelvis, we see the 5 vertebrae of the low back, the 12 vertebrae of the mid back with the ribs, 2 beautiful collarbones, 7 vertebrae in the neck, a 10-pound head, and 2 arms. Now the trick is how to take all 206 of these bones, throw them in a bag of electromagnetic jelly, and see if they can have a structure that's both stable and flexible. The current myth in Western fitness and rehab is that stability comes from six-pack abs or core strength. Of course, if this was the case, there would be over 7 billion people in real trouble around the world. So we're going to use what research shows us is a better model, the relationship between the 3 diaphragms that are now understood to control stability and mobility of the human body. Think of this story as being one of the old Rube Goldberg cartoons, where things affect every other thing. So we see here as he lifts his hand, it throws the food up to the bird, which pours the substance into here, which lights the fire and shoots the rocket and pulls the napkin and wipes his mouth right afterwards. It's just this type of interaction that we'll be exploring. The first diaphragm is the one that we're most familiar with, and that's the respiratory diaphragm. It lies under the entire bottom of the rib cage, separating the hearts and lungs from the internal organs. When the diaphragm contracts, it pulls down in order to increase the space in the rib cage. When it fills with air, giving it pneumatic stability. At the same time, the diaphragm pushing down also increases intra-abdominal pressure, as it's called. This gives uplift on the spine and the discs below, decreasing spinal pressure, and it provides stability to the pelvic ring. Now, if there's only downward pressure on the respiratory diaphragm, your organs would fall out on the floor. So we need a second diaphragm called the pelvic floor to support the abdominal contents. The pelvic floor doesn't get much press for many reasons, but it's a critical structure in a relationship and is being better understood how it and the other 2 diaphragms operate together. So when we get that positive pressure down, there's a slight give on the pelvic floor if it's able to. You then get a nice even dynamic rhythm between the 2 that keeps both diaphragms mobile and flexible. In other words, they're in a relationship or part of a system, just like the Goldberg cartoon. Now, of course, in life there are times when you have to get more breath, and when that occurs, we have a backup system that is up here at the thoracic outlet, and it includes the voice box or the glottis and the chest and neck muscles. And this thoracic outlet is a critical backup system where the muscles of the neck and the chest lift up on the rib cage in order to increase the space. You do this, for example, when you put your hands on your knees to catch your breath. The problem is when it pulls up, it also pulls down and creates a compression in the neck and the cervical spine. This relationship between the thoracic outlet and the respiratory diaphragm is so critical because of the incredible number of times we breathe. If we begin to breathe from the neck rather than the belly, it's a huge burden on our systems. Only the heart beats more often than when we breathe. We need to appreciate that we breathe 12 to 15 times a minute, which is over 900 times an hour and over 17,000 times a day. So there's a big workload here. Now, how does this all fit together? Well, what we know is that if a person is breathing from the diaphragm, it has a positive effect on the autonomic nervous system, what we'll call the mind. On the other hand, if they're breathing from the chest or thoracic stress breath, it has a negative effect on the autonomic nervous system, or what we're calling mind here. With the chest breath, we get what's known as a sympathetic or fight or flight breath pattern. Whereas if it's from the diaphragm, we get the opposite effect, which is the relaxation response or parasympathetic breath pattern. Both have an immediate and direct effect on our health and quality of movement. Our breathing patterns, you can think of breath as spirit, whose Latin root means wind, have a great effect on our body and mind depending on the type of breathing we're doing, even if everything else in life is great. This then affects the pain and other perceptions we have in our minds. The connection between our mind, body, and spirit is interconnected, and changes to any one will affect the others, just like the cartoon. The DSR method works so well because we address all of these systems and how they influence one another. For example, when a person's in pain, that's an output of the mind, you experience the sympathetic response up in the body, leading to increased pain, as we see here. If we were to breathe through our diaphragm and relax, using spirit or breath, the pain will decrease. Our inflammatory levels and cortisol production go up in stress and down when we're at ease. This can be seen with mood as well, where mood's difficult to sustain in stress, but is stabilized and the important chemicals are made to support our mood when we're at ease. In addition, your immune system is depleted over time, and when we're in rest, it's rebuilt and revitalized to stabilize ourselves. Our ability to balance also is affected in that when we're under stress, our balance decreases and we're at a higher risk for fall. The muscle tone overall in the body is increased when we're under stress, and of course, it eases and relaxes when we're in the relaxation phase. Our gastrointestinal or gut function is negatively affected under stress and is enhanced. In fact, we call it the rest and digest phase when we're at ease. Critically important is our breathing pattern. When we're under stress, we breathe even more from the neck. And when we're at ease, we breathe from the belly. So if that chest breath gets looping under stress, then it creates a higher and higher level of neck breathing, feeding on itself. Further, we know that our sleep is decreased, quality of sleep is decreased, and that our thinking is negatively affected long term when we're under chronic stress. Applying all of what we've just discussed, let's say we have a person with back pain and they're breathing with their chest. Well, if they're up there breathing with their chest, that fuels the sympathetic phases and it affects them negatively in all the areas we just mentioned. When they restore their diaphragmatic breath, then we can begin to affect all these in a positive way. To do this, we need them to understand not only is the mind driving the body, but we now understand that if the body is tight from compensating or protecting, then this affects if and how the respiratory and pelvic floors interact. Those compensations are going to block that rhythm and set up a vicious cycle of perpetual looping in the stress mode. If we just talk about trying to relax and breathe, that's not sufficient if there are structural limitations such as tight pelvic muscles. So to be effective, we look at the dynamics between both the structure and physiology and the function, but also understand that in this relationship, it's not a mind over a body type of thing anymore, but as a mutual equal relationship, it's between the mind and the body, and also what I call spirit or story. By that I mean the relationship between the dorsal prefrontal cortex, what we'll call the executive mind, and the limbic system, or the lizard brain, as we might call it. They're always in conversation. Back and forth, trying to determine what's real, what's not real, what the fears and worries are of the day. Whoever wins this conversation ultimately drives whether the autonomic system, or what we're calling mind, is in a state of ease or dis-ease. That story then fuels the dynamic of the relationship of whether the person breathes in their chest or their diaphragm. If they aren't breathing from their diaphragm, not only do they lose then the intra-abdominal pressure, but they increase the interdiscal pressure in both the neck and the low back. And they also lose the positive downward pressure on the pelvic floor. Part of the pelvic floor, via the obturators, attaches to the femurs or thigh bones. So if that pelvic floor begins to tighten and lose its flexibility, it limits the power and stability of the kinetic chain. Then, in the kinetic chain, instead of maintaining a nice neutrality in the knee and foot down to the big toe, we see that they lose stability and creates a collapsing rotation of the leg that can lead to knee issues, thigh issues, shin splints, plantar fasciitis, all the way down to a big toe bunion. In yoga, they often talk about grounding the big toe, and when you push your big toe into the ground, you get the opposite effect up the kinetic chain, reversing all of these rotations, which then opens the pelvic floor, allowing the diaphragm to work, which offloads the stress on the low back and neck, and creates the parasympathetic response, easing the dynamics between our prefrontal cortex and the limbic system. We now know in the most recent literature of pain science that the practice of becoming aware in the moment, or mindfulness of our present spirit/story, that we can begin to actually thicken the connection between the lizard brain and the executive brain. When we do, we get more stability that leads to us having the ability to gain control over this process and not allow ourselves to drop into a vicious cycle, but rather we learn to restore strength and stability and improve flexibility. And as we write these relationships or dynamic processes, comfort and control are sustained. But this takes ongoing care, as we're not static. There is no endpoint to health. Through our posture, or what we're calling our body, our thoughts about our job, our relationship with family members, aspects of spirit, we might call those, and all those sorts of things, we begin to edit and create this balancing as we step into the systems of mind, body, and spirit that affect health. It really matters if we have meaningful work, if we feel unsupported. That's all going to drive these dynamics and set up the unhealthy loops that'll eventually either generate in the physical issues or in the physiological, emotional, spiritual systems. And I find patients are so relieved to find out why, this is why I have to take my acid, this is why I feel anxious and why I can't sleep, and I have to take my sleep meds and I don't seem to be as clear as I used to be, and I keep getting these rashes and colds, and now they want me on a mood elevator, and I sure have a lot of pain in a lot of areas of my body all the time. All of those Rube Goldberg connections demonstrate how the different systems of the mind and spirit express themselves either positively or negatively on your health and your ability to move with ease. I've found that oftentimes this is the first time that anyone's explained to people how all their systems are related. And then from there, of course, it's exciting to take someone to a whole new level of awareness and control in their health, from moment to moment, day to day, through this 3 diaphragm model, helping them realize their interconnectedness of mind, body, and spirit in very practical, scientific, grounded way. So, if you or someone you care for is ready to fully experience this powerful healing story, please visit our website at dsrclinic.com and click on the Contact Us tab to get started.